So good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the training for our 2022 Advocacy Day. As folks are joining the call, I'm asking them to put their name, their region or chapter in the chat. And if you want to share why you're participating in Advocacy Day or what you hope to get out of the Advocacy Day, please put that in the chat as well. Please note that it's difficult for me to monitor the chat while I'm presenting. So feel free to just raise your hand if you have a question. There will also be Audubon staff that'll be monitoring that, and they can try to answer some questions as well. And then also, by the way, if there's any questions that come up that you don't feel get answered, you should feel free to always email me and we can set up a time to talk as well. So folks that have just joined, please put your name in the chat, introduce yourselves, and we'll get started. So I wanted to give you all sort of an overview for what to expect for Advocacy Day this year. And then we'll talk a little bit about the logistics leading up to the day, just next Wednesday, and then really step through the policy priorities and talking points that hopefully you've already reviewed in the toolkit that we sent out. And then we'll have time for a Q&A and next steps. And it says here that we end at 1 o'clock. I've actually reserved until 1:30. So I hope folks realize there's no rush. People can drop off if you feel all your answers have been questioned or all your questions have been answered. But for folks that have additional questions, I am available until 1:30 and talk through anything you like. Also, we will have a open office hours on Monday morning from 10 to 12 or 11 to 1, I believe, if there's any lingering questions anybody has. Any questions about the agenda before I move on? Okay, thanks. Once again, I'll ask folks to stay on mute if they can, if they're not speaking, and then to come off mute if they have a question. That would be really helpful to me. So first of all, I just wanted to set the table with a little bit of information about Advocacy Day, why we do it, and what our goals are. For those of you that are new, this is our 7th or 8th year that we've done Advocacy Day since I joined in Audubon, California as the Director of Policy in 2014. And before COVID, what we would do would be invite members like you up to Sacramento, and we would tour through the halls of the Capitol in order to meet with legislators and share our priorities. And it was a great opportunity for Audubon members to connect with each other and to elevate issues with their elected officials. Obviously, with COVID, we've had to transition to be doing Zoom meetings, but there's been some benefits in that too, because it's made it a lot more accessible for people across the state to participate and to meet with their elected officials. Feedback we've gotten both from participants in the past and elected officials and their staff that we've met with has always been highly positive. People have really appreciated the meetings, they've heard the Audubon message, and it's helped us pass legislation and get budget wins that have helped birds in the state. So I really want to emphasize for all of you that are participating, have in the past and new this year, this work really makes a difference. And it makes a difference for birds, and I think it makes a difference for your communities too. This year, our overall goal is really, and theme is kind of pushing nature-based climate solutions that protect birds and expand access to nature for everybody. And you'll see that in the legislation that we're highlighting. The overall goals that we have every year for Advocacy Day is to speak up for birds. There's nobody in the state of California that speaks for birds like Audubon and its members. And we're proud of that. People look to us for guidance on what makes good policy to benefit birds. And we're continuing that tradition with Advocacy Day. We want to be elevating our priorities. Audubon is a big organization, but not always the biggest in the room among the enviros, but nobody has a network like Audubon does. And so when we show up strong, it really elevates our priorities to help birds. We also really want you to feel like you're building your engagement skills. My goal in all of this is that for you all to not need me, for you guys to be able to reach out to your elected officials and set up meetings and talk about issues that are pressing for your community or your chapter. So give us feedback on how we can help you build your engagement skills. Obviously activating the network, and then overall, both for you, for our staff, and for the folks that we meet with, that it's a rewarding and positive experience. And I think keeping that spirit of positivity is really important. So setting the table a little bit about, some of the messaging that we use and why we use it. I think all of you have probably seen, that since the 1970s, North America has lost about 3 billion birds in our bird populations across the country. And much of that has been because of the loss of habitat and other disruptions caused by humans. So we try to present solutions to address the loss of 3 billion birds. We want to reverse habitat loss. We want to take measures that avoid collisions with windows and turbines and other things that birds run into on their migratory pathways. We want to reduce the use of pesticides and other toxins that have adverse impacts on birds. And overall, we want to make the communities in which we are friendly, which means planting more native plants, reducing the number of outdoor cats, preserving natural spaces. And a lot of that, honestly, about the bird friendliness of communities is getting more people outdoors and connected with nature, which is one of the themes you'll see again and again this year. So in addition to the loss of 3 billion birds since the 1970s, Audubon science is telling us that climate change at the current trajectories, we are placing 2/3 of North American bird species at a much higher risk of extinction due to the impacts of climate change. But the good news is that if we take action, we can save at least 3/4 of those, or stabilize and save at least 3/4 of those populations, those species, I should say. And so I think this underscores what we're already hearing from the heat waves in England to the drought in the West, that we need action on climate now. And the birds are telling us we can do it. And the good news is in California, we are really starting to take some action. And I think this is another bit of positivity that we can bring into our meeting with legislators. In May, California released its Pathways to the 3030 document. It also released its Natural and Working Land Climate Smart Strategy. For those of you who are not familiar with these initiatives, 30 by 30 is actually an international effort to conserve 30% of lands and waters for nature by 2030, which is considered a necessary step to preserving up to 50%, which is likely the minimum needed to really preserve biodiversity globally. Governor Newsom and the legislature have committed to the 3030 initiative, and this Pathways document lays out several actions the state will take in order to try to meet that goal. We'll be talking a little bit about some legislation that Audubon is sponsoring and writing this year to advance 30 by 30, as well as some budget plays. On natural and working lands climate smart strategies, this goes to something Audubon has been working on for years in what we call our Working Lands program, where we work with private landowners, we work with farmers in order to make those habitats more wildlife friendly, more bird friendly, and climate smart. So again, we'll be talking a little bit about those in the talking points, but I wanted to flag that these two major initiatives had been moving forward in California already. Legislators know about them, and it's a reason for optimism, even among all the bad news that we get around climate and the environment these days. So what to expect from Advocacy Day this year? One of the things is you will be getting emails very soon over the next few days from Audubon staff that will actually have calendar invitations. So look for these emails. You'll get a regular email from the staff, but you'll also get calendar invitations for those of you that use electronic calendars that will have the time and date of the meeting, as well as a Zoom link so you can connect to that meeting. We are working feverishly to finalize these schedules. I promise, I wish that I was able to give you schedules a week ago, but we are still working with legislative offices to get them to commit to times. And this happens every year. This happens for everybody who does these kind of advocacy days, nailing down offices to get us times. They push right to the last minute. So we might even be getting a few on Monday, but I'm really hoping that you'll start getting these over the next few days. There will be two options. You can always join by video. We hope you will. But if you're unable to and can only join by phone, we still want you to participate. So please feel that you can. When you get this email from the staff person telling you about your meeting, we will be asking for participants to be speakers on particular items. We hope that you'll consider being a speaker, and I'll talk a little more about that. But please know this, especially if it's your first time participating in Advocacy Day, you do not need to be an expert on the issue. You don't have to memorize the talking points. You can summarize them and if you're comfortable. You can read directly from a piece of paper if that makes you comfortable as well. I can tell you after you're practicing a couple of times, you'll get them down. The staff that we will meet with, or the legislator, they don't expect you to be an expert on the particular bill or subject matter. They know that you're there talking as an advocate. So I just don't want anybody to feel intimidated, and I want to encourage everybody to participate and be a speaker on any of the items that come up. Here's a sample agenda for what you can expect in meetings. First, when you get your calendar invitation, we will be asking you to join 15 minutes early. So, for example, this year, every meeting that we have will either start at the top of the hour at 10 o'clock, for example, or at the bottom of the hour, it's 10:30. So that we're trying to just start at 10, 11, 12. Some meetings we have are at the halfway mark. And but we would like you to join 15 minutes early. So if you get an invitation, it'll actually say for a 10 o'clock meeting, it will say, please join us at 9:45, and the meeting will start at 9:45. And there's a few reasons we want to do that. We want all our participants to join 15 minutes early so that everybody is there and ready when the legislator or their staff person joins at, say, 10 o'clock, when the meeting's actually supposed to start. It also gives the meeting facilitator, who's usually an Audubon staff person, an opportunity to check in with everybody, to make sure that we have speakers on every issue, to answer any last minute questions, to make sure people have their audio working and their video working. And so please join 15 minutes early. And if everybody joins early and we sort it out and you have 5 or 10 minutes left, then you can get up and get a cup of coffee or do something, ready to be back when the meeting starts. But if you can join 15 minutes early, we really appreciate it. Most of you will only have 1, 2, maybe 3 meetings over the course of the day, and we will do our best to spread them out. So you shouldn't be rushing from meeting to meeting, generally. Once the meeting starts and the legislator joins, the facilitator will introduce themselves. They'll ask the legislator and the staff person from the legislative office to introduce themselves as well, say a few words. We will then do introductions, and we ask that we keep introductions very brief. If you're in a meeting with, say, 2 or 3 or 4 other Audubon members, we will likely do a round robin where everybody gets to say their name, what their chapter is, whether they're a constituent. If there are more than maybe, say, 6 or 7 people on a meeting, we will ask that everybody introduces themselves via the chat. And the reason we do this is we sometimes can have meetings that have 10, 20, we've had meetings with 30 people in them before. And if we gave everybody the chance to introduce themselves, we wouldn't have enough time to have the advocacy that the call is actually about. What we would ask is that everybody introduce themselves in the chat, say if you're a constituent or where you live in the district, if you do live in that district. And then if you're a speaker, when it's your turn to speak, you would introduce yourself. As soon as introductions are done, and again, we should keep them brief, we will then really get into the meat of the meeting and run through priority items. The facilitator will start this process off, and then they will pass off each item to one of the designated speakers. And we don't need to get into the details of what those particular items are right now, because I'll go into them in greater depth in a few moments. Is there any questions on the sample agenda, anything like that?
Yeah, I have a question, Mike. It's Susan Kirks, Madrone Audubon. I'm sorry I'm late and I didn't know what the protocol was. Should I have raised my hand?
That's great, but I'm happy to take the question. No worries, Susan.
Yeah, I was just looking at number 2, invest in nature-based climate solutions now. You know, there's quite a bit of discussion about the term nature-based these days, and as a kind of a whitewashing of indigenous principles, indigenous leadership. I'm hearing it more and more almost on a daily basis. So I think if we're going to use that term, we should also have an item for supporting and facilitating indigenous or tribal leadership in all of our districts, and in relationship to, you know, whatever our mission is. You're a much better wordsmith than I am, but I really would ask that we include something like that if we're going to use the term nature-based.
Thanks, Susan. I'll take a look at that and I'll see about adjusting the talking points. It certainly is intrinsic in all the documents that fall under the nature-based climate solution umbrella. The 3030 and the Natural Working Lands Climate Smart Strategy both make specific mention of Indigenous leadership, and also the budget related to that has very significant investments on that.
Yeah.
Let me think about how to incorporate that into the talking points. Like I said, we get
Thank you.
more a bit about that a bit later, but thanks for bringing it up, Susan. I appreciate it. Any other questions on the sample agenda? Okay, thanks. So one of the other items we ask everybody who's participating is to coordinate with us on social media. So if you at your chapter, for example, have a social media person that can be tracking the tweets and Facebook posts from Audubon California on the day of, we would greatly appreciate kind of the boost, the retweet or repost. Or as you get images from your own folks, if folks from Golden Gate Audubon are meeting with someone and somebody takes a screenshot, to share that on your own social media and say, Glenn Phillips from Golden Gate Audubon had a great meeting with Senator Skinner or something along those lines. That would be fantastic. Basically, just get the word out there that Audubon's engaging in this way. Thank legislators for participating with us, and sort of boost the signal around the day. So that's kind of the just general background of what you can expect from Advocacy Day leading up. And what I want to get into now is a little more of the nuts and bolts of the policy on the talking points. And I will say that if you have some questions about how the meetings go, there's a few resources that we can apply. And then one of them is that some very brave colleagues of mine recorded a sample meeting with me yesterday, and that we're posting on YouTube. Oh, I think we have a bit of interference there. If someone's not on mute, if you could mute yourself, that would be great. So we have a YouTube video that Molly Songas, our communications lead, is going to post. And I expect Molly will put that into the chat sometime very soon. And you can see an example of how a meeting runs. And if you don't get that, let me know. And we'll also include a link in that in the emails you'll be receiving. So I'll give you a little better sense if you haven't done these meetings before of what to expect. Any questions kind of just generally on how the meetings go, any timing, any agenda like that?
I have a quick question in reference to the screenshot and enabling the social media. Are you going to be recording it for Audubon, the actual session? Or do we have to do that like via phone in order to enhance that engagement access for you?
Well, the Audubon staff facilitators will be taking screenshots, so they're happy to share those with all the participants. So you could use that. We're not going to record every meeting. It's really like we'll do the meeting, and then maybe at the end of it, the facilitator will say, hey, can we take everybody smile? We'll take a picture with the senator or the assembly member, and then we can share that back out with you guys. I just wanted to say that, you should feel free to be able to take a screenshot if you know how to do that on your computer yourself, if you want to post it to your own Twitter or something like that. The one caveat is that the Audubon facilitator will ask at the outset, is it okay if we take a screenshot? If you are participating and you don't want to be in a screenshot, you can just turn your camera off, or you can let them know. We don't want to force anybody to put their picture out there if that's not what they signed up for. And do not feel uncomfortable. If you're uncomfortable with having your picture out there, let us know and don't feel bad about that. Like I said, we just want people to feel comfortable with it. Does that make sense, Leslie? Great. Gail, I see your hand, and then I'll go to Bettina. Oh, I can't hear you, Gail.
Okay. I'm noticing there's 73 people in this group right now, and you said we'd be in groups of 5 to 6, and I'm wondering what the criteria is for how we will be divided. Is it constituencies?
Right. So to pull back the curtain a little bit, We have 470 people or so that have signed up for Advocacy Day. Last year, we had about the same number. But we probably have closer to somewhere from 70 to 100 that actually end up joining meetings. So how I tend to organize the meetings is first and foremost, make sure that every meeting has at least one constituent from the district for the office with which we're meeting. And then hopefully there's multiple constituents for that particular district. And then if we need to round it out with a few others, so say you were the only member participant from your particular assembly district, then I might ask folks from your chapter, a few other folks from your chapter, 3, 4, or 5, to join the call with you so that you're not alone in there. And so then we have a nice group. So typically the smallest meeting will be 3 or 4, and the biggest can be a couple dozen in some of our really big chapter areas like the Bay Area. So that's sort of how it works. But I try to do it geographically. So even if you have people with you, Gail, they're likely at least from your geographic area, even if they're not from your district.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. I will say one thing, just because I know Diane Colburn's on, and she's one of my ringers from Yellow Audubon. I will at times ask people like Diane or Tama Watts to slot into other meetings because they know the talking points and they're used to doing it really well, and they can help out. So every once in a while, there'll be others in there. Bettina.
Thanks, Mike. My question is, in past years, it's gone a little differently. One time, all the meetings and arrangements are set by the chapter, and we're getting our assignments from a chapter leader. And sometimes those assignments don't come until the morning of, or so I've had it happen 15 minutes ahead of time. So then it's hard to know all the talking points. Other times you guys have set up our meetings and we've gotten a notification from you. And so then we have a little bit more planning time. And I'm wondering, I don't see a lot of folks from my particular chapter. I'm wondering, is it going to, all the assignments coming directly from you this time, or is that going to change?
Yes. So how it's going to work is right now, like I said, we have about 470 people who have signed up at the last count that I had yesterday. All those people are on an email list that I distribute information to right now. So everybody should be getting that. And then when we actually assign a particular meeting, there will be anywhere from say 5 to 10 of you that might be in a meeting. You will get a separate email that says you will be meeting with Assemblymember Jones at 10 o'clock on August 3rd. Here's your Zoom information. That type of notification you should be getting over the next couple of days, with the caveat that there are certain priority offices where we have a large number of people who have registered. We really want to get a meeting with an office, and the office is not being responsive to us.
Right.
We're kind of setting a cutoff time of Monday at noon for those, but those are outliers. So you should be getting most of your kind of assignments over the next couple of days. And then the very last kind of wave will be Monday afternoon for those offices that only gave us their information at the last minute. Does that answer your question?
Sometimes we get the meeting times and assignments set that we're to join a particular meeting.
Right.
But then this talking point assignments, who's speaking on what point, sometimes that's not decided until we jump in to that meeting at the 15 minutes early. That makes it difficult to memorize all 10.
Oh, that's a great point. So
talking points. So trying to know ahead of time is a lot easier to sound at least coherent on what we're trying to speak.
For sure. So that's why in the email that you'll be getting from our staff telling you about the particular meeting, maybe I'll double bolt it this year. We definitely had it last year, which is we are asking you, the participants who are going to show up to the meeting, to volunteer for one of those items 1 through 5. And then if we don't get those volunteers, we're going to have to make those assignments kind of at the last minute. So this is part of the agency, I think, of participants like you being willing to stand up and say, you know, I'll talk about issue number 1, or I'll talk about issue number 5. And that's one of the reasons, you know, especially for chapter leaders and organizers can maybe help us get those. because we need two real things from everybody that wants to participate when you get one of these emails from the staff telling when your meeting is. The first is we really need you to RSVP and confirm that you will come to that meeting. Because if I don't have enough confirmations, at least one constituent for the meeting, and then at least a couple other people that I can put in that meeting with them, I will cancel that meeting, because I don't want to have a meeting with Senator Smith if I don't have a constituent from Senator Smith's district in that meeting. I don't want to waste their time. I want to be respectful of it. And they will ask, and they will be very disappointed if they don't. The other thing that's happened along those lines is we've had people RSVP, the Audubon staffer starts the call, and then no members join. And the Audubon staff is left there alone trying to facilitate a call by themselves. And we don't want to do that either. We'd rather just cancel the meeting and we can do a follow-up another time.
So Amira from our chapter just asked if she can't make certain times, if she should let us know. I'm guessing you'll want us to just confirm or not the meeting
Yes.
that you're setting up for us. Probably
Yep.
makes it easier, right?
Yes.
Okay,
And then,
thank you so much.
sure, so that's the first thing is please RSVP. And if I don't get adequate RSVPs, I have to cancel the meeting. The second thing is please volunteer for a speaking role, because those speaking roles 1 through 5, they're going to go into more detail. Those are for you. Those are not for the Audubon staffer. It's not really appropriate, but it's not the place of the Audubon staffer that's facilitating the call to step through the advocacy points. Because what they want to hear is they want to hear from you all, which is why we did the meeting in the first place. And if you don't have 5 people, say there's 5 talking points and you don't have 5 people, a person can do more than one. And trust me, if you've done this before, once you go through the talking points once or twice, you're going to feel like an expert on them. And so if you have a couple of meetings, you can say, I'll take issue number 1 both times. You're good to go. And you'll be nice and comfortable with it. Thanks for raising that, Bettina. I appreciate it. Any other questions on general sort of run of show before we get into the substance of the policy? These are great questions. Thank you, everybody. Okay. To make sure I can advance my thing. There we go.
Mike, there was one more question in the chat. What if we are close to the district, but with redistricting, we are no longer in the district? Does that affect anything?
That's a great question. That is a new curveball this year. We are organizing you in the existing districts as they exist this year, because that's all the data that National Audubon had, the only way to do it. I think it's fair. I think it's okay for you to say, I'm a constituent in your district in the present tense and leave it at that. If you get into a redistricting conversation, then you can clarify one way or the other. But right now, here's the thing. Right now, these legislators are in the districts that exist, and they're your representative, and they're going to be voting on important things in August that matter. So whether they're thinking about whether they're going to get your vote in the future or not is kind of the other thing. Right now, you're a constituent. And you're telling them you want them to vote for these things in the next few weeks. So let's keep that in mind. But that's a great question. Thank you. So you should have received a link, if not the actual document for our Audubon Toolkit. It has a lot of the information that I'm presenting already. In there are the major talking points. I'm just going to cover these very briefly at a high level and really invite you to read the toolkit, and then also just take some questions if people have some questions around these items. So the first couple of items that we'll be raising with legislators are really our budget priorities and large-scale policy priorities that help set up some of the asks for our legislation. And the first is expanding equitable access to nature through the 30/30 initiative, which I mentioned before. And the major talking points here, there's a lot of text, by the way, you can kind of hone down. You don't have to see all the bullet points that are in the toolkit. But the crux of it really is that everybody knows the access to nature and to its benefits are necessary for healthy people and healthy communities and a rich biodiversity in California. We also know that disadvantaged communities and communities of color are 3 times more likely to live in nature-deprived communities and communities that have environmental justice issues like pollution and lack of access to clean, safe, and affordable drinking water. 30/30 is an effort that will expand access to nature and conserve lands for biodiversity. I think that's what it really comes down to. And I think the other message we want to send around this is, it's one thing to have a high sort of falutin plan like 30-30, but to do it, to do the conservation, to conserve land and water, to expand access to nature, takes money and implementation and political will. And we are asking these legislators to commit that political will to help us achieve this goal and get these benefits. So, that's sort of the spirit of this first ask. The second one is the Natural and Working Lands Climate Smart Strategy, which is a little more wonky and technical. But essentially, we know that climate change is harming communities and wildlife now. We also know that investments in natural and working lands can reduce greenhouse gas emissions and make us more resilient to the impacts of climate change. And we want to support voluntary incentive programs like conservation ranching, which is one of our pieces of legislation. But there's a ton of different types of voluntary programs that private landowners can engage in that make lands more climate resilient and more biodiverse. And so overall, we're asking the legislators to support budget implementation for restoration programs and voluntary incentive programs that will make the state more climate resilient. Any questions on these first two kind of overarching budget policy asks?
Hi, Mike. Leslie, again,
Hello.
are you aware? I think it was in the newspaper. I don't recall the news outlet, but there was an article to support the #1 initiative, Nature Access, that the healthiest people, #1 are birders. #2, I think, was knitting. So it ranked and it had percentages. It was very powerful to support health issues with everybody in lockdown with COVID, to add as a another document to reinforce that initiative of how important, not only physically but mentally, for health and well-being for everyone, to support that. Are you familiar with that?
I am not. I'm embarrassed to say, but I would love if you would email that to me.
Yeah, I'll look for it, because I remember emailing it to a friend, because I'm so conscientious about telling her to get out and birding, and how it was my health benefit, especially with COVID, and she said she's going to take up knitting.
Oh, well, I think someone in the chat just said maybe you should go outside, bird in the yard while you're knitting. You can do everything. So, thanks, Jim. Oh, sorry, Leslie, did I cut you off? You okay? Okay, Jim, go ahead.
Yeah, is item 2 exclusively for private lands? You mentioned private land, but I don't see that word in here. Is there no part of the natural solutions that involve public lands?
No, it doesn't. It involves public lands as well, and the management of public lands. So the document that I think Casey might have put a link in there in the chat. If you read through that, it talks a lot about both how public lands and private lands can work. A lot of the kind of incentive programs we talk about are obviously focused with private landowners. Over half the land in the state is private land, so we know we can't reach our. It's easier to achieve conservation on public lands, even though that's an immense challenge. But on private lands, we need some real special programs and regulation in order to do that. And we will never achieve our conservation goals if we're not working with those private landowners in a way that gets them on board to really do some, exciting and progressive conservation. So yeah, both of those are in there.
Thank you.
Any other questions on these priorities? Okay. I'm just going to put these up for a second, and then I'm going to step through each of them individually. But we have 5 bills, 2 Senate bills and 3 Assembly bills. As you'll note in the toolkit, when we talk about Senate bills this year, we will be talking to members of the Assembly. And when we talk about Assembly bills this year, we'll be talking to members of the Senate. And the reason that is that these bills have already gotten out of their House of origin. So the Assembly has already passed these Assembly bills and handed them off to the Senate for amendment and passage. And then once the Senate is done, then the bills will go to the governor's desk. So they've switched houses. So I just want to be clear, because sometimes there's a little confusion, like, why am I talking to a senator about an assembly bill? And just know that these bills have already passed out of their house of origin and have now moved on to the sister house to be amended and hopefully passed. So we'll be talking about Senate Bill 977, which is a conservation ranching incentive program, Senate Bill 260, the Climate Corporate Accountability Act, Assembly Bill 30, the Equitable Outdoor Access Act, Assembly Bill 2278, which creates a reporting mechanism for progress on the 30 by 30 initiative. And then, oh, sorry, it's not Assembly Bill 30. That's a typo down there. We'll get down to it. It's corrected below. It's actually Assembly Bill 2382, which is light pollution control. A bill, by the way, brought to us and really worked on by Shani Kleinhaus from Santa Clara Valley Audubon in partnership. It's been an exciting partnership this year. So to start with, what is Senate Bill 977? It creates the Conservation Ranching Incentive Program at the Wildlife Conservation Board, which will set up a series of grants for willing ranch owners and operators to work with entities like regional conservation, resource conservation districts, or Audubon or others, where we can come in and help them create a management plan and a conservation plan for the lands on which they're grazing, with a specific goal of increasing biodiversity and improving climate benefits, reducing impacts overall from the rangelands. California is covered with rangelands and grasslands. Grassland species are one of the most imperiled species that a group of species that we have in the state. And much of this land is in private ownership. We've seen conservation ranching be very successful in other states. Audubon's program is expanding rapidly in California, but it lacks adequate funding. We have more demand from landowners than we have funding and capability to work with them. There's a lot of excitement about this bill. It's had broad bipartisan support as it moved through the Senate and through the Assembly. We're headed into the Assembly Appropriations Committee. It also has, we've worked with the Newsom administration and the Wildlife Conservation Board and had good feedback from them. So this bill seems like it's on a very positive trajectory to pass. And so we can get this program going next year. Any questions about SB 977? Okay.
Oh,
Oh,
I'm sorry, I don't have a direct question about the bill, but I'm seeing a lot of things coming, other links coming through the chat, and I'm not quite sure where they're coming from, trying to understand if there are Audubon's talking points or some other organizations talking points.
no, sorry, I should have clarified that. Thanks for raising it. So those are just, a lot of times people want more specific information about the legislation itself. So I asked Casey to put a link to the actual legislative language. So that when you see the leginfo.legislature.ca.gov, that is actually the official California site that has the full text of the legislation, as well as analyses that are provided by the committees. So some folks like to really do a deep dive on these issues, and that's why I asked Casey to provide it. But none of you need, if you don't want to go that deep, all the information that you need is in the toolkit itself. So I should have emphasized that.
No problem. Thank you so much.
Sure. I know Susan raised her hands, and then Gail, and then I see that there's another question in the chat that I'll come back to. Susan?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I will do a deep dive into the actual language of this bill, and I know that will help inform me, but I was just thinking with the people here, if you know a couple of points that might be helpful. Is there a provision about helping animal agriculture ranchers to transition to plant-based agriculture with a combined support for conservation, which would be so much better for the land in general? And there is definitely a move underway in California to lead that, transitioning away from raising animals to be sent for slaughter. Because I will say this, and I want everyone on the call to know that National Audubon and this, new move to put the Audubon stamp of approval on beef or something in grocery stores is frankly horrifying to me. And it's certainly not something, I think our chapter would support. We don't have any control over it, But I would like to know if there is also that provision in terms of supporting people who don't raise animals or who are raising them to go to transform into a different agriculture and also support conservation.
Thanks, Susan. When we work on a piece of legislation, it has to be focused on sort of a single subject. This one is about trying to make rangelands that are being grazed more conservation friendly. So the particular problem we're trying to solve here are the impacts that are having to rangelands and grasslands, because many of them are being converted to other uses like vineyards and orchards, which actually do not provide benefits for birds in the same way. And in order to make these rangelands, we know we can get a really big bang for our buck for birds and for climate on actively grazed lands if they're grazed in the proper way. That's the particular problem we're trying to solve here. I think when you're talking about moving away from an animal-based ag system, that's another set of issues that we can talk about. But that's not what this bill is trying to accomplish. I'm trying to basically turn a very specific dial.
Okay, thank you. That answers my question. It is what I thought. And, it's not just vineyards and orchards that are.
I know, Susan, but we don't have a lot of time on this call. I would be happy to follow up with you about this discussion around the animal versus plant-based ag.
No, no, we don't have time for that. I get that. I'm
Oh.
fine. You just answered my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Okay, Gail. Sorry, Gail, you're on mute.
I'm just going back to the logistics and using Senate Bill 977 as an example. When you started to talk to the group at the beginning about how we would be subdivided and how we would pick our talking points, when we say a talking point, then I understand, my understanding is that you would volunteer to speak about Senate Bill 977 and present some summary of these bullets that are here, and someone else would go to item 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, whatever. But this is one item that you would want to volunteer for.
Thank you very much for clarifying that, Gail. Yes, yeah. So you would, when you sign up for a particular item, whether it's one of those major issues or the piece of legislation for that particular call. Thanks for clarifying. Nancy.
Sure thing. I just wanted to encourage people who might have comments like Susan did to reach out to your chapter reps and also your reps to the Audubon California board, that if there are additional issues you'd like us to follow up on with Mike, we're happy to help you do that. Because again, as Mike was saying, these are usually so specific and they've already been sort of through the ringer since January and pawed through for about 7 months or more. But I do want to encourage people to just follow up with your chapter leaders or your council leaders, and they'll be able to help you kind of articulate some of the other things you'd like to see get attention. Thanks, Mike.
Sure, thanks. And I note in the chat, Carl, I'm sorry, that was a typo that's in the toolkit. I'll seek to amend that. And then when we circulate the revised talking points, we'll make sure that it does not say XX states. That was me needing to fact check something and not correcting it. So thanks for pointing that out. I know that Palaio corrected it in there, but we'll get that done in the final one as well. So I apologize for the typo. Sometimes things get by you. Susan and Gail, you both still have your hands up, but I think we've answered your questions. Did you have anything you wanted to add?
Sorry, I'll take mine down.
Okay, thanks. Okay, great. I'm sorry, I thought I had a slide in for Senate Bill 260, which is the Corporate Accountability Act, and I must have dropped it off. So yeah, so I apologize. I'm just going to cover Senate Bill 260 verbally right now, and then we can take questions on it. But Senate Bill 260 is a fairly straightforward bill in that from Senator Scott Wiener from the Bay Area, which requires basically corporations with revenues over $1 billion to account for their greenhouse gas emissions in the state and in their supply chain, and to report that to the state of California and publicly. That's all it does. Obviously, it's being fought by a lot of big business interests and being engaged as anti-corporate or anti-business. But really what we're trying to do is daylight that the biggest emitters are these, frankly, mega corporations that have a lot of, they produce a lot of greenhouse gas emissions because of their size. A lot of them are also petroleum-based industries. So we are just trying, and Senator Wiener, who is not, by the way, especially progressive on environmental issues, he's pretty business friendly. He really just wants to lay out there, what are the emissions coming from these businesses, so we can understand along the lines where we need to better regulate and where there's opportunities for efficiencies to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So that's what Senate Bill 260 will be. And you'll see the talking points that are in the toolkit around that. Moving on to the Assembly. So again, when we go talk to senators, we'll be talking about these Assembly Bill. Assembly Bill 30 will establish as the policy of the state of California that everyone should have safe and affordable access to nature. It makes a number of findings about the benefits of the access to nature and also how inequitable access to nature has been historically and continues to be in much of the state. It also requires the state agencies to implement that policy into their programs related to outdoor activities. So it does more than just kind of set like a high idealized policy for the state. It actually requires implementation through various programs and policies. It also finally requires a report periodically on how we're making progress in that implementation of improving equitable access to the outdoors. This bill has had very broad support, actually surprisingly bipartisan support in many circumstances. We've had conversations with the administration and had positive feedback from them about this. It aligns with Governor Newsom's 30-30 strategy and his Outdoors for All initiative, which was announced last winter. And so this bill just helps the legislature have kind of a say in how the governor's policy goes forward. Any questions about Assembly Bill 30? Okay. Assembly Bill 2278 from Assemblymember Ash Kalra, who's, by the way, also the author of Assembly Bill 30. And I would also want to say that Assemblymember Kalra from the South Bay was our author a few years ago on our migratory bird protection bill, where California stepped up to protect migratory birds when the Trump administration basically repealed applicability of the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. So Assemblymember Kalra, for many years, has been a real champion for Audubon causes, and we appreciate being able to work with him on bills. This bill requires reporting specifically on the progress for the 30-30 initiative and are we meeting our goals for the conservation of land and water and our biodiversity goals. Right now, the 30-30 initiative is an initiative that comes from the governor's office, but it's not the law of the land. If the governor leaves office, what will the next governor do with it? But this bill provides some kind of accountability and reporting to happen on a regular basis and allows us to make changes to adaptively manage over time if we're not meeting our 30-30 goals. We also think it'll be a real tool to get funding for natural resources to drive the budget decisions to help implement 30-30 over the next 7 or 8 years. And Susan, I see you got your hand up.
Yes, Mike, I just wanted to suggest there's the group Together Bay Area representing the Regional Bay Area Open Space Coalition for all of us generally in the Bay Area. If you Google them and look at the website, there's a really good 30 by 30 project list in all of our different areas, which is an example of how to implement 30 by 30. And I'm on the policy committee for that group, and we worked long to develop projects and have this website and also interact with legislators. So Together Bay Area, if you Google it, just in case there's someone not familiar with it, to see examples of different types of projects that we might be able to relate to.
Thank you, Susan. And Joan.
Yes, thank you. I was wondering, is there some overlap between AB30 and AB2278?
There's a little bit, but actually, and we've talked to the administration about this because of the reporting requirement. But AB 2278 is really more focused on, are we meeting and setting benchmarks for land and water conservation? Like, what's the acreage? What's the plan going forward to meet those acreage goals? And what have been the biodiversity or natural resource outcomes from the work that's been done? It's much more focused on that than it is on the equitable outdoor piece. So I would expect ultimately that we might just get one report that tells us all these things, but each of the bills kind of tackles a problem in a different way.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. And by the way, the administration has said, and they say it in the pathways document, that they will provide regular reports and given some updates. But that's the administration saying it again. This is for the legislature to kind of have a little skin in the game to say, no, we expect, by 2024 to get a report. So there's some kind of accountability there. The last bill is Assembly Bill 2382 from Assemblymember Lee, also from the South Bay. And as I said, this bill really came to life because of the work of Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society. And it sets a policy as a policy of the state to reduce light pollution and conserve energy. It also requires particular adjustments to lighting fixtures that are on state-owned or operated buildings, such as light shielding, shut-off mechanisms, et cetera, in order to reduce unnecessarily light pollution. It does include a number of exemptions, and frankly, this is where most of the work has been done on the bill, working with state agencies, trying to figure out when does it apply to a correctional facility or an emergency or a roadside construction project. So we're still working on the bill. We just did a round of edits this week that we hope will resolve all the agency concerns, but we still also want to give the bill real teeth. And I just want to give real props to Shani Kleinhaus. I don't know if she's on this call or not, but Shani really has done a ton of work on this bill and made it happen, and always been a voice for making sure that the bill really would have a real consequence and really help birds and preserve the night sky. So that's what. Oh, there you are. Do you want to add anything, Shani?
No, you're doing a great job. Thanks.
I'll just compliment you some more. So we'll just go with that. But it's been great to work with her, and I just appreciated the partnership with the chapter as well. So any questions on AB 2382?
Yeah, this is Vince from the Ventura chapter. I am looking at it right now, and I noticed that it doesn't talk about the color of light. Curious as to what our stance is about requiring things like parking structures to have a certain color of light versus, bright white. You do, a certain color, a certain temperature of light.
Well, I'll answer a little bit, and then I'll pass to Shani to answer a little more. But we actually have a pretty substantial set of edits that we're working on right now that have not yet been daylighted. So the version you're looking at is a little older. So we do get into some of that, I think. But Shani, do you want to respond?
Yeah, we tried from the start to ask the assembly member to include correlated color temperature in the bill. And they asked us to deal with this during amendments, which is what we're trying to do now. So we have been trying to actually require that all lights should be shielded and of correlated color temperature of no more than 2700 Kelvin. But we're not there yet. We're still working on this bill.
So as a follow-up, would it be appropriate for us to mention that during our meetings with our reps, that we really want this type of amendment be seriously considered?
I don't know. I'll defer to Mike on this one. I would like that, but I'm not sure whether that's the right thing to do in these type of meetings.
I think it's fair to say, look, like this bill is a good first start. But Senator, we hope you will help. If there are amendments to it that make it more effective, we hope you'll support those too. And, this only affects state-owned and operated buildings. When this bill was introduced, it was going to apply to all lighting in the state. And that got shut down, as you might imagine, politically pretty quickly. We don't need to get into that in a meeting with the senator. But I think what we can emphasize is, hey, this is a first good step. It mirrors what we've seen in over a dozen other states. Like Texas, Connecticut, Colorado, Rhode Island, Florida,
even Puerto Rico.
Puerto Rico has an amazing light pollution legislation. So California is actually lagging in just getting this first step done. And so I think, Vince, to your point, I think it's fair to say, look, this is a very good first step for California. And if there are additional pieces in the legislation that better control light trespass and reduce its impacts, please support those as well. I mean, I think you can add that in however you want. And you want to add your own sort of color to it, please do.
Also, Mike, if people are especially interested in that, maybe we can share the amendments that we're proposing, and maybe they can see if their own senators would support that.
Yeah, Chani, let's make sure that Assembly Member Lee's office is okay with us going public with any amendments, and then we'll figure out.
Okay,
what we'll do.
again, I'll let you deal with that.
Yeah, I don't want to get up in front of the office because it's his bill.
Yeah,
Any
okay.
final questions on 2382? Okay.
Hello.
Oh,
I was wondering if this bill focuses on seasonal lighting during migration or lighting throughout the year.
It actually applies to lighting throughout the year. But we note that the impacts are especially great during migration. But it'd be difficult to regulate, say, during only the bird migratory season of maybe February through May, or however you wanted to characterize that. So this is really like requiring shielding, for example, or shut off throughout the year for particular types of lights. Seasonal lighting, I know you didn't mean this by seasonal lighting, but there's also an exemption in there for like Christmas tree lights or things like that. Like, we're not trying to regulate that. We're trying to regulate the big fixtures. Did that answer your question, John?
Yes, thank you.
Great. Cherie?
Yes, I just wanted to be sure, I imagine with this group you are aware, lighting has a vast effect on the insect populations as well. And so you need to be very careful about when you're talking about wavelengths, that you take that into account.
Yes, and I've had some input from some colleagues of mine that work on insects and those biodiversity issues as well, who frankly would like to see the bill go further in order to protect insect populations. Travis.
So, hi everybody, Travis Longcore, LA Audubon. This is actually the field that I spend about half my time as a scientist working on. And I'm actually right now working on a project for California Department of Transportation to try to help them update their guidance for how to minimize impacts of roadway lighting, especially relative to sensitive species. It's research at this point, but what I wanted to mention is one of the things that comes out of it is this issue about color and insects especially. And I'm looking through, and I have a set of results that we've released at a couple of conferences now, but basically it confirms what you might imagine, which is you want to have the lowest possible color temperature. The yellow and the red light gets the light in a place where humans still have sensitivity to it, but avoids the peak sensitivity of other species. Birds are pretty hard because they've got pretty broad sensitivity across a lot of wavelengths, but insects especially, and invertebrates, arthropods in general, are much more sensitive to shorter wavelengths than humans are. So if there's a tuning, we call this spectral tuning, if there's a tuning message to be had to the legislature to just push those color temperatures down, there's going to be research that's coming out from state-funded work that confirms this as well. And so they will not be getting out in front of themselves by pushing for more outdoor lighting to be of the yellow to red, as opposed to in the green, blue, and shorter wavelengths. I just want to mention that. Thanks. This is great legislation.
Thanks, Travis. And I'll say that this is, our hope is this isn't the end of the discussion. If we get 2382 done, like I said, it only applies to the state buildings, which are a tiny big fragment of, as you and I think discussed, Travis, like it's a start, but we got a lot more work to do.
Yeah.
So
lead by example.
Yeah. Any other questions either on this bill or any of the other pieces of legislation that we brought up? Joan?
Yes, you indicated on a couple of these issues that they have broad bipartisan support. Are there any in here that are particularly contentious or that that don't have broad support?
I'd have to go back and check, but I've actually been surprised. I think all of our bills this year have had at least some bipartisan support, like SB 977 and AB 2382 have had clear Actually, I think they all have had bipartisan support. I'd have to go back and see if there's been any actually opposition. But by and large, I think you're comfortable saying all of our bills have had bipartisan support. And you could particularly emphasize SB 977 and AB 2382. I think there's a little bit of political discomfort on with the 3030 initiative for like AB 2278, but I think that even Republicans can appreciate that the legislature wants a reporting from the administration on how that's going. And really no one is against improving access to the outdoors. So that's had Republican support as well. Gail. Sorry, I can't hear you, Gail.
There we go, sorry. Once we get into our constituency groups, CNSH Audubon has a legislation and advocacy committee that's been working on about 10 pieces of legislation over the last year, following them, tracking them, communicating, writing letters, etc. And they have two other pieces of legislation that are really high priorities for our local area. Would there be any time in the meeting with our legislators to ask them what their position is on those, or?
Yeah, and actually that's a really great point, and I should have had a slide on it. This kind of goes back to my initial thing about my hope for your experience with the day, which is like, this is your meeting. If we hope that you will emphasize the talking points we've given and ask them to support the pieces of legislation we've done. But if you've got a pressing issue that you want to raise, make space for that. And you know, it's your meeting. We're trying to facilitate a meeting between you and your legislator. If your legislator gets on and says, hey, you know, I want to talk to you about this restoration project that's in the district. What do you guys know about that? And you talk for 25 minutes about a restoration project in the district, and you've engaged that legislator in a real deep way, and you never get around to our stuff, that's okay. You've created a real relationship with them. Maybe at the end, I'll ask the facilitator will be like, hey, we didn't get to talk about our bills. We'll follow up with you. You know, our policy team will follow up with you and say, this is our list of asks. We're going to share that with them anyway. So yes, I want you to feel flexible to make the meeting with yours. Don't just like go into digressions,
right?
Talk about, you know, I don't know, good old days in high school or something. But if you're having a real connection on an issue with them or an issue that's pressing to you, please do pursue that. Maybe you could let the facilitator.
Yeah, okay. That's what I was going to ask.
Know. We'll work it into the agenda, and what we'll do is maybe truncate the other things.
Okay.
Like we don't need to go through all the stuff on 977. Just say, you know, Assembly member, we hope you'll support Senate Bill 977, the Conservation Ranch Incentive Program, because it does X, Y, and Z, right. And then move on to the next one.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's great. It's exciting when folks bring their issues to the table. Diane.
Yeah, hi, Mike. Just a comment. I just wanted to say that even though, can you hear me?
I can, great, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that even though you guys have done a great job of shepherding these bills thus far without a lot of opposition and bipartisan support and getting them into the second house, I think it's really good that we're advocating for them at this point, because a lot of times late in the session when it's getting ready to go to its last committee is when the opposition comes up, and also some of these bills are budget related issues. And so, you know, when it gets down to budget priorities, there can be pushback. So I still think it's really good that we're letting the members know that there's people in the districts that care about these issues.
Absolutely. And that's what I was saying. There are no chickens until they're all hatched and safely picked up and put in the coop, or whatever extended metaphor I could use. Like, I'm not sleeping well until the governor signs them. Even if they pass, I still need the governor to sign them. So
yeah.
Bettina.
Thank you. I guess you maybe with Gail and you answered the question, but I'm thinking not everyone in the district or in the area is going to know what the priorities of the conservation or the chapter might be. And so maybe the facilitator would better understand what those priorities are, or maybe if the Conservation Committee knows ahead of time, they can make that available before the assignments go out so that we know what those priorities are.
Yeah, I would say that
in the meetings.
Yeah, what I would ask, and I'll include this in the email that'll go out to y'all, which is if you have other issues you want to raise, that you let the facilitator know that so they can adjust properly and then hand off to you at the right time. So I'll make a note of that, Bettina. That way people don't feel like they have to know what like I can't expect the Audubon staff person that I may assign to the particular meeting to know the conservation issues for that region. So I'll have to rely on chapter members like you to raise that issue, and then we'll create space in the agenda. A couple things on the other sort of decorum part of the meeting, right, is please do bring up these local issues. Please do not engage in a debate or a challenge with the legislator. Even if they express skepticism about one of our bills or they're on the other side of a local issue that you raise, acknowledge that there's a difference of opinion and then move on. It's not productive in these kind of meetings to try to get into a tete-a-tete where you're gonna argue over a particular issue. Like if they say, well, I don't think 30-30 is a worthy endeavor, you could say, well, we're constituents from your district. We're telling you, we think it's important. We hope you'll listen to us, and then you move on. It's not a space to try to like, you know, throw blows politically or anything like that. And I don't think we've ever had that issue in any of these meetings, even with people and staffer that have opposed some of our legislation. But I just wanted to flag for you to keep it polite, keep good decorum, express your issues. If there's disagreement, then just move on. Vince, I see you got your hand up.
There we go. All right. Yeah, just a quick logistical question. For us in Ventura, I just did a quick look. We actually have 2 assembly members with that encompass our chapter. Are you guys going to be able to coordinate with both of those so that we have one meeting and we can talk about kind of our chapter's outreach in general with the camp, with our city? Or are we going to have to do individually with the 2?
You have to do 2. And
Okay.
what we'll do is try to have actual constituents from the district in each of those meetings. And you may have a lot of overlap. Like, let's just say you guys have 6 participants coming from Ventura chapter. Maybe there's 3 in one and 3 in the other, but all 6 of you might be in both meetings just to support each other. Like I said, I want to have at least 1 constituent in each meeting, and then I'll kind of bolster them up with other folks from the chapter and then as needed from the region.
Okay, thanks.
Great. Any other questions? Well, thank you all again. I've recorded the presentation today, so if you know that there are other participants or members of your chapter who weren't able to watch this, we will make it available, and there will be a link in the emails that will go out to all of you and to all registered participants. I really want to emphasize again how much Audubon appreciates you all stepping up to do Advocacy Day with us. Your patience in the scheduling, we know it's last minute. We know there seems to be a lot to learn in the talking points, but every time folks have participated, they've done a great job, and it's really advanced Audubon priorities. Oh, I see, Amira, you've got a question.
Yeah, just put it in the chat, but do you need our addresses then to be able to sign us based on the district? Because our districts have moved, et cetera, or whatever. A lot of people don't know their own districts.
No, we actually have, for everybody who registered, we have the National Audubon. If you're an Audubon member, we have everything in a database, and we're organizing based on that.
So you already have our addresses.
Yeah, so long as that's updated. I mean, sometimes our information is a little behind the times, but by and large, I think we're pretty accurate.
Perfect, thanks.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for the question. And then, so there'll be a link to this video if you know folks that might want to watch it to get this kind of background. I will have office hours. You'll get a link for that on Monday if you have follow-up questions, but you should also always just feel free to shoot me an email. And if we need, we can jump on the phone and talk through it. So thank you all again. I look forward to next week. And I hope you have a great weekend and get out and get to see some good birds. Bye, everybody.